Hello, everyone. Today, I'm with Danielle Thomson. She's the founder of Design Match. Thank you so much for being here, Danielle. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? In other words, who is Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, that answer changes probably weekly. I think I'm an entrepreneur, definitely running Design Match, a really fun company to build and run. And I'm also a digital nomad, traveling the world now in Mexico, but I've been to, I think I calculated like 40 countries, and probably lived in half of those. And I'm also a designer myself. And I think that comes through in a lot of different ways, through the way that I solve problems, the way I think about things. I'm a wife, I have an amazing husband and awesome family. And yeah, that's, I think, a little bit about myself.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing. Just to give you a little backstory, Danielle and I basically met in Mexico when I was a digital nomad back then. And we just, clicked immediately. She was such a giving person. Like since the moment I met, she was like, I'm going to send you this course for free. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to put you in touch with this person. You're like one of the most giving persons that I've ever met in my life.
Oh, thank you so much.
Uh,
I think I realize that I really enjoy other people's success. Like, even like when it comes to like, if I make a meal, I like love when other people are eating it. Like, I just really enjoy other people's happiness.
Beautiful. And what would you say is your secret to being happy most of the time?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I praise happiness as something that I strive to necessarily. I think chasing happiness can be a bit problematic sometimes because then if you have other emotions, it feels like, oh my gosh, like something's wrong with me. And so I think more just knowing what's going on with my emotions. And so to do that, I've done a lot of work on myself, a lot of, self-inquiry, whether it be meditation, breath work, plant medicine. But over the last, I think, decade, really spend a lot of time trying to achieve some kind of self-mastery to understand what's happening so that when I'm sad or I don't feel well, it's more of a sign. It's kind of like a street light that says, hey, stop, something's not in full alignment. Let's take a look and see. And if I didn't have those signs, that would be kind of sad, and so I'm really grateful for even when I feel sad or when I feel angry or upset, because they give me insight into, how I can bring more alignment into my life. And so, yeah, I think that would be the foundation of that.
Yeah, it's just about acknowledging those emotions and let them be, right? Instead of judging yourself and be like, why am I feeling sad or why am I feeling scared? And judging yourself is a matter about like being okay. Where is this, emotion coming from? And just let it go, right?
Yeah.
And so, can you tell us a bit more about your journey as an entrepreneur? So, what made you start your own business?
I think I've always been entrepreneurial, like from birth. I used to sell my parents things, objects in the house. I had a little cash register, and I was always really fascinated with like making money. I thought it was really cool because it's like this exchange. It's like, what can I give you that's valuable enough that you pay me so that I could buy candy? It's like it was like always thinking about those things. My dad, he's an entrepreneur, and so he works in finance. So kind of growing up in that space with less fear around money, like how it actually works, understanding the foundations of money, I think created a really safe space for me, as well as my parents always encouraged like a really abundance mindset. So like when I was a kid, I had a vision board and all of these things. And I always felt very affluent, even if I wasn't, there were times in my life where my family didn't have so much, but I always felt super abundant and rich in my own way, whether it was just in my imagination or it was in the real world. I think I just always said, hey, I have everything. And then when I went into the work world, I was in school And I was like, okay, I got to make some more money. I was freelancing already. And freelancing, I started because I was dating some guy and he was freelancing. I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. And he was making like $100 an hour. And I was like, oh, I can make some money. And I think, yeah, my first freelance job, I was editing this guy's online dating profile photos for $25 a photo. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I got a few freelance gigs at my university and I was making like $20 an hour. I was so happy about that. And then when I was deciding, coming out of school, deciding, okay, do I want to focus more on the freelancing or do I want to get a job? I went and applied for a job. And it was really interesting because when I went to that job, they said yes. And I was going to make $75,000, which 10 years ago was like quite a lot, and it still is quite a lot, but 10 years ago it was like really a lot for a very underqualified student. And I was going to be like head of design at this like multinational company. Don't know how I swung that, but I remember I told them I was going to work remotely and they're like, what do you mean you have to come into work? I was like, but I'm more effective at home. Don't you want me to be more effective? I can produce more. And they're like, no, the culture, water cooler culture is so important. And I was like, what is this? And from that day I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to work for myself because this work world is crazy. And then I also learned like that, yeah, just like that the freedom that you can have with having your own business is just so much more.
Yes, 100%. And how do you feel like having this abundant mindset since you were a kid, right? How do you feel like this has helped you in your adult life, living in this abundant mindset?
Yeah, I think I always believe things will work out, just generally, like there's a baseline. Of course, I have less anxiety. Like I don't have anxiety anymore, but like when I was younger in my 20s, I had some anxiety because like, life is like moving fast and things are changing. And I think something that's important to acknowledge as well is like when you're in your 20s, for example, like early 20s, your brain hasn't finished developing. So everything you're experiencing is just like there's so much novel and there's so much your mind's trying to figure out. So I don't think that the abundance mindset necessarily took away all the anxiety around money or stress around money, but I think there's always this baseline feeling of like, okay, if I just follow what feels right, things will kind of work themselves out. And it really did. I remember I was telling my friend yesterday a story of me being in Buenos Aires and I wasn't having the best time eventually. Like I felt like I needed to go and I didn't have much money, and I had rent already paid there, but I left that rent and I went to Lisbon. And in Lisbon, I paid the highest amount of rent I had ever paid in my life to that point, which seems so financially irresponsible, but it just felt like the perfect place after what I had been through in Buenos Aires. And I had one client and I actually quit that client because I was getting so stressed. So I had no money and I think I had $14,000 in debt at that exact point. And I had lived in this beautiful apartment, but like, how could I afford anything else, and then a few days later, I get this contract, so I get approached for a contract for $14,000 a month from this company in the UK. And I was like, oh my gosh, this worked out perfectly. But like, I had so many stories like that where things just like felt almost magical. And so I feel like that abundance mindset opens me up to a lot of opportunity.
Yes, 100%. Just living in this abundant mindset and like manifesting things and just embodying yourself as if it had already happened is so powerful. I love that. And with regards to like you working remotely and being a nomad, how long have you worked remotely for?
Since I guess like 12 years. I've never had a job in person aside from I worked at a theme park for 2 weeks. So I've always worked remotely, but I started traveling, working remotely like 10, 11 years, something like that. So it was really new when I started. Oh my goodness. You don't have a SIM card and technology has also shifted quite a lot in the last few years. So I used to have a Skype call with my clients every like week and no one expected deliverables before that. So like we'd have a Dropbox folder and I just put everything in there. So it was crazy because I'm like traveling through Panama, Costa Rica, and all these places with no internet. And I was just like, go somewhere with internet one day to like a 7-Eleven, upload all my files or have a call and then continue on with my backpacking. But now the world's so much more interconnected, which has definitely shifted what it means to be a nomad.
Beautiful. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with when they work remotely from home. So how do you, like, what tips can you share with us with regards to your, routine that can help with your mental health and stay like mentally strong?
Mhm. Well, I think it's really also contingent on the work that you're doing as well, and then the community around you. So if you're doing work for a company versus if you're doing work for yourself, doing work just for yourself can be really isolating. I think we just talked about that a little while ago. And I think making sure that you're around people who understand you, who understand what you're going through. I think the hardest thing is not only being isolated, but feeling misunderstood. When your family or your parents are like, what, you're still working? Like, isn't it past 5? Or they're like, what do you mean you work online? And they're just very confused. And you feel more isolated because you not only are alone physically, but emotionally you're alone. And so I think creating a psychologically safe environment for yourself through being in spaces where there's community that's really abundant, whether it's going to a co-working space or being in a country, if you are choosing your country that has a lot of nomads, can be very, very, very helpful.
Yes. I actually felt understood for the first time in my life when I started my journey as a digital nomad and I started traveling and meeting other digital nomads like you. I was like, I'm actually not the only one in this planet, right? Because in Barcelona, for my group of friends, I was pretty much the only one or one of the few of them that did that, right? So having a community of people that have the same goals and visions and are like-minded like you, it's definitely really, really powerful and useful for sure. And going to co-working spaces too, because when you work for yourself, I work for myself too, right? And I spend a lot of hours at home alone, so having that option to interact with people when you want to, it definitely helps a lot for sure.
Definitely, 100%. And I think this is something like that people definitely undervalue when they're choosing their locations. So I think sometimes when we think of, okay, hey, I'm a digital nomad, I have the freedom to go anywhere. I've had, like in my past, when I've worked with people one-on-one, they've been like, oh, I want to go to Paris and London and Tokyo, which is fantastic. Those are amazing places. But they might be harder places to find that community right away, because there's such huge cities where a lot of people are working and, doing the 9 to 5. And so I often recommend, why don't you start somewhere smaller, where it's a little bit easier to tap in. Even though Barcelona is a big city, I find the community is very strong there and it's quite easy to tap in. But, even a smaller city like that, which is like quite a large city. But I think being in these huge, like metropolitans, like the biggest cities in the world, might be a bit harder to integrate into.
Yes, it's harder, but at the same time, it's easier to find more international people, because one thing that I struggled with, for example, is that my first trip as a digital nomad was Turkey. So it was hard for me to find people that spoke English, right? Then I went to Georgia, then I went to Albania, and it was pretty much the same thing. So for those digital nomads out there, what I would recommend is to just search for what are the digital nomad hotspots and go there,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Otherwise, it can be pretty lonely and isolating for sure.
And you have to figure out everything on your own. Like it's like a lot, whether it's how to get a SIM card or like what's transportation like here. Or it's so great when you land somewhere and you can be maybe in a co-living with other nomads and just be like, turn around and be like, how do you do this?
Yes, 100%. And as a woman in a predominantly male-dominated industry, what challenges have you faced as an entrepreneur, as a female entrepreneur?
I think I faced some unique challenges as a female entrepreneur of color, specifically. I think that earlier on in my career, like sometimes I was even sexualized. People would be like kind of hitting on me. Some of my clients, it was very uncomfortable. Being very aware of how my hair was, and specifically around my blackness. Did I have an afro? Did I have braids? People having preference, like, oh, you changed your hair, like I missed it, like the other way. And so I think being a female and being a female of color has presented some unique challenges. And my mindset was be so good that it doesn't matter, and I am now. I'm excellent, and I don't experience those things anymore. But earlier on, when I wasn't so good that it mattered for them, unfortunately, it was a way harder space to navigate. And I had to kind of decide on my values, what's important to me, and how I want to approach this, because like, I think I didn't want to be upset all the time. I didn't want to be angry all the time. I didn't want to be, fighting all the time, because I didn't have the energy for that. And that's just not like what I wanted to embody. So I really had to sit with myself and be like, okay, where are my limits? What do I want to speak out for? What will I just push to the side for a moment and come back later? And I think that was a hard thing to do, because I felt like, oh, you have to speak out with everything that doesn't feel right, or you have to say something. But what I noticed was I was more effective in training behavior for people around me, from a calm perspective, from a loving perspective, than from a frustrated or angry perspective. And it's hard, because you're like, hey, this person did something wrong. I am upset, but it just wasn't effective communicating with them that this hurt me or this was negative when I was still upset and angry. So I had to be calm and approach those situations with a lot of delicacy, not just for them, but for myself and for my inner peace.
And let go of those thoughts or comments or judgments, right?
Definitely.
And building and managing a team of, designers can be very challenging. So how do you go about finding and hiring talented designers for your business?
Well, I think I don't manage the designers. I manage the internal team of Design Match, which has engineers. We do have a designer, project managers, and those things. And then Design Match is a network of designers. So I recruit designers, but don't really manage them. And so finding great talent, I think a lot of times people look at, resumes and where they worked before, but their past isn't necessarily an indication of what they're going to do for you. And so when it comes to recruiting and hiring, I'm looking for communication. How well, if I say something, how much do you understand of what I said? What percentage did you really understand and can, imagine what I'm trying to create in the world? And having that good communication, having someone who is just understands you, it's like the best, and you have to work on it over time, over the years. But as a foundation, rather than looking at their resume and their portfolio and what did they do before, I'm looking for, if I tell you an idea, how can you interpret that idea into something close to being real? And so that's what I'm looking for when I'm hiring for Design Match, the core team. And for the designers, I'm looking for flexibility, right? They're working with a lot of founders who are inventors, who have new ideas. And so someone who can kind of go with the flow of their business it's really important. So I'm looking for that skill when it comes to designers.
Going with the flow and adaptability, right?
Exactly.
And what strategies have you implemented in your business to attract new clients?
Yeah, well, Design Match hasn't done much of any marketing actually in the last few years, which is crazy. But we are going to start doing some emails and some ads. But Design Match has grown really organically, I think, through my own presence online, which is cool, like LinkedIn. I've done some workshops. We have a lot of partnerships with universities, incubators, and accelerators. But yeah, it's been quite an organic growth. So this year we're super excited to take it to the next level and do some intentional growth.
Beautiful. And as a successful entrepreneur, what advice would you give to other female entrepreneurs that are starting their own businesses?
I think something important is to design the lifestyle you want and then have the business kind of reflect that. And nothing is wrong. So if you like working and you really like being involved in your business, that is perfectly fine. I feel like specifically in the work online community, sometimes that's put down. It's like you need a passive income or it needs to be easy. But like, I love a good challenge. You know, I really enjoy what I do. I don't want to just like press a button and that's it. I don't think that would be super enjoyable or fulfilling for very long. So I think thinking about like, what's an ideal day for you? And then working backwards from there is a really, really great way to craft either a business idea or business model that works for you and solve a pain that already exists. You know, so if you're starting out making something new, don't try and create something where you have to convince people that they're suffering. People need to know that they're suffering. Like in my business, people know they need a designer and they don't know where to find one. They know that problem already. And so I introduce a solution. But if you're starting out and I'm thinking, oh, actually, my clients need, I don't know, this other combination of things, but I've never seen it in the marketplace, it's going to be very tough for you to convince them that they have a problem. So it's much easier to start out with a known problem.
100%. And how does your ideal day look like?
I think I've had so many ideal days. I think it starts off just, I don't have an alarm and I don't like waking up with an alarm. I had to have an alarm today because I had a really early call, but generally speaking, I just like to have a lot of free time. I don't like to have very many calls in the day. So just having a lot of space. I recently enjoy cooking now. So that's really cool. I would like to cook in the day. I like going to Muay Thai at some point in the day. That's really fun. It's great when the weather is like not so hot. So then you could like go outside for a walk and really spend time with my husband. And then in the evening, it'd be super nice to spend time with some friends.
Beautiful. And can you share with us your love story? Because it's one of the most beautiful stories I've heard and seen myself. I met you and, Lucas. And when I met you, I was like, wow, I aspire to have such a healthy and loving couple one day. So can you share it with us?
Of course. So in the wake of the pandemic, I started taking Spanish lessons online. Before I was in Barcelona at school, but because everything shut down, I went back to my parents' house actually, which was the first time I lived with my parents in a long time. It was actually amazing. I had so much fun with them. But I ended up taking Spanish classes online. And before that, there were a few interesting things. One is that year, I had this strong feeling that my partner was coming, like very strong. And I wrote a list of like their ideal qualities. I did this beautiful ceremony in the ocean, like kind of like sending it off. And I used to do these things of preparing space for him. So I used to prepare the side of the bed. I used to leave room in my closet, like preparing physical space for this person. And then I get home, and just before I start taking classes, I speak with an astrologist because my brother was super into astrology. He's like, you gotta get your chart read. I was like, okay, there's literally nothing to do right now. I'll get my chart read. And I download some app, like didn't even seem legit, and you pay to talk with someone for like a few minutes. And I asked them about my business and they're like, yeah, business is fine, but love is so strong. I was like, love, I'm in a pandemic, I'm at home. What do you mean? And he's like, love. And he's like, remember this date. And I was like, okay, cool. So I actually go to my Spanish class online, and it's with my old teacher that I had for the last few months. And he was in a really bad mood, like really bad. So I was like, oh no, need not the energy I want right now, need a new teacher. So I look for a new teacher and I find Lucas. Actually, my mom recommends Lucas. She's like, this guy seems like your type of person. I was like, okay, cool. And I book a call with him, and I don't just book one call, which normal students do. I book calls every day for the next like 2 weeks. So he's freaking out. He's like, who is this person? This person has no chill. And I also opened my Spanish textbook and I read all the titles, and I was like, this is what I want to learn, because I thought it would be helpful that he knew. But on the other side, he was freaking out, thinking like, oh my gosh, she knows exactly what she wants to learn. She's like super A-type, like, and I'm like definitely not A-type. So it was super funny. So we go on the call and I see him and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my entire life. Like so beautiful. And I start speaking. and I speak with the same accent in Spanish as him, like the Uruguayan accent. And he was like, what? Do you have like a lot of Argentinian friends, Uruguayan friends? And I was like, I lived there for a while. And then we find out that, and I was like, and my birthday's this week. And he's like, mine too. And I was like, mine's the 25th. And he's like, mine's the 26th. And then we start talking about our traveling, because he had been traveling, living in Asia. Because I was like, I just came back from Asia. He's like, oh, me too. And we found out that we had been in the same country and sometimes the same city 5 times in the last 5 years. So we had been following each other around the world, which is absolutely insane. And yeah, we just started talking, and like it just clicked instantly. And we started going on dates online, and we started, hanging out online after class. And then one day we're like, let's meet up together. And we decided to meet up here in Mexico. And a few months into our relationship, I tried to find the conversation with the astrologist. And I couldn't find it until one day, for some reason, the app opened up. I don't know what happened. And it turns out that the day they said was our first date, which is like crazy. And after Mexico, we headed to Portugal to live in a van for a few weeks. And he proposed to me in the van. And then my mom came to visit to meet him. And it was just so beautiful. And so now it's been 3 years, which is absolutely insane. It feels like a day. And it just gets better, our communication gets so much better. Just so much more love, like everything gets so much better.
Beautiful. Such a beautiful love story. I could hear it every day. Love it. And what advice would you give to other women that are going through a bad breakup right now, or that are feeling frustrated by failed connections and the whole dating world?
Yeah, I actually had a call with a friend yesterday about this, because I was like, how are you feeling about dating? Because last time I had talked to her, she was so frustrated and kind of like, I don't want to open myself up again. Like, this is just, I'm just going to focus on me. Right. And I said to her, like, I heard this quote. It was like, your soulmate is sent to heal you, and vice versa. And so, like, the person that you're destined to be with, if you believe in destiny, or a person that you're truly compatible with, in my personal opinion, it's not always going to feel perfect, because they will bring up those shadows in you, and they will bring up all of those things. And so I think when I was talking to her, my advice was kind of like, not necessarily to seek anything out in particular, but you're not necessarily supposed to be at a certain point within yourself to be with someone. And I think that's a big narrative right now. This like very hyper independent, like, I can do it on my own. I want to heal so many things. And I definitely think you should make sure that there's like a baseline of like that, like, you're going into the relationship in a place where you're able to love and receive love. But aside from that, like, I think where you are right now is the perfect place for someone to come in, And I think if I heard that earlier in my relationship life, in my dating life, I think it would feel a little bit more, because I always felt like I needed to be someone else to be able to enter into something that I have now, but exactly as I was, which was not perfect, which had so many like little shadows, which had a hard time integrating her life with this beautiful partner. All of those things were still true, but I still have an amazing relationship. So if you are feeling frustrated, if you are going through a breakup, like, just note that, keep going. It's okay. And don't close your heart. Whatever you do, try as hard as you can. If it closes, like, let it close temporarily, but then try and open it up again.
Yeah. There's something that a lot of women struggle with, actually, is that I need to achieve X, Y, and Z, or I need to heal or work on this, work on that before I'm ready for a relationship. But I don't feel like you're ever ready for it, right? It just, when the person arrives, it arrives, and you just go with the flow and you make it work. Because as you said, if you're made for one another, it will work 100%.
Precisely. And especially if you have the intention of sticking through it, right? I think in marriage, one thing that changes is, instead of looking for a way out, you look for a way through. And I think if there's like this mutual commitment between you and your partner of like, let's figure this out together, then that's all you really need, because problems will arise. But if you're already one foot out the door, or if your heart's kind of closed and you're not fully open, it's really hard for something to work, you know? It's really hard. You're definitely not setting yourself up for success.
Yes, 100%. And is there anything else that you would like to add about yourself for this interview?
Well, just a tidbit, I think, like as a woman in business, and we're dealing with so many things, our hormones, our bodies, our relationships, just like a world of things. And like I'm learning myself to be gentler, you know, with myself, that we are already superhumans, you know, we're super women who are doing so much, and that like the way that I am is okay. And I think that was a scary thought, to be like, if I'm okay with myself, then I won't be improving. And it's like, no, but you can still be okay. You can still be at peace with yourself and where you are, of everything that's happening, and still be and still be striving for better, right? It's not one or the other. And so that's advice I'm gonna even put here, just for even myself to hear it back, because I think it's so important. But yes, you are okay, and exactly where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be.
Beautiful. You're enough only because you just are, and because you exist and you're in this planet, right?
Exactly.
Just honor your presence, 100%. Beautiful. It's been such an honor to have you here, Danielle. I admire you and I appreciate you so much on a business level, on a personal level. I cannot wait to see you again sometime soon. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge and expertise with us.
Thank you so much.